August 6, 1942. Aboard the carrier Shokaku, somewhere in the waters off Truk Lagoon, 5 men gathered in a windowless briefing room. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and diesel fumes. On the steel table between them, intelligence reports, production figures, casualty estimates, maps marked with red circles that seemed to multiply with each passing week. They were admirals, architects of Pearl Harbor, conquerors of the Pacific, men who had sunk battleships, seized islands, driven the white man from Asia in 6 months. But today, they were silent. Because what they saw on those documents wasn't enemy propaganda, it was the truth, and the truth was worse than any battle they had ever lost. They thought they had won the war in December, but what they read that afternoon told them they had already lost it. The room smelled of sweat and salt. Overhead, a single bulb swung gently with the motion of the ship. Outside, the flight deck baked under the equatorial sun. Mechanics hammered at damaged zeros. Pilots slept in hammocks waiting for orders that would send them back into the sky. Inside, the admirals did not speak at first. One traced a finger across a column of numbers. Another lit another cigarette, though his last still burned in the ashtray. A third stared at the ceiling as if searching for an answer that wasn't there. They had all been at Midway, 2 months ago, 4 carriers lost in a single day. The turning point, the Americans would call it later, but these men knew something darker. Midway wasn't the turning point. Midway was the reveal, the moment the curtain fell, the moment the stage lights came on, and what stood before them, what had always stood before them, was not an enemy they could defeat. It was an enemy they could only delay. The intelligence officer, a young lieutenant with circles under his eyes, shuffled his papers. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Gentlemen, the American production estimates have been confirmed." They had believed. God, how they had believed. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. 8 battleships sunk or damaged. Nearly 200 aircraft destroyed. The American Pacific Fleet crippled in a single morning. Admiral Yamamoto himself had called it a tactical masterpiece. The Emperor had praised them. Tokyo had celebrated in the streets. And across the Pacific in 6 blazing months, Japan had done what no empire in history had done. Hong Kong, Singapore, Manila, Rangoon, the Dutch East Indies, Malaya, Wake, Guam, an arc of conquest stretching from India to Alaska, from the Aleutians to Australia. The white man's fortresses fell like dominoes. The British surrendered. The Dutch fled. The Americans retreated island by island until there was nowhere left to run. It had seemed inevitable. Destiny. Hako Ichiu, the 8 corners of the world under one roof. But there were voices even then, whispers in the staff rooms, warnings buried in reports that never reached the ministers. Yamamoto himself had said it. "I shall run wild for 6 months. After that, I have no expectation of success." 6 months. And now it was August. The intelligence officer cleared his throat. "The first section covers American naval construction, as of July 1942. He paused, swallowed. "They have launched more tonnage in the past 6 months than we can build in 2 years. Silence. One of the admirals, Rear Admiral Matome Ugaki, Yamamoto's chief of staff, leaned forward. His voice was quiet, controlled. "Show us the numbers." The lieutenant spread the documents across the table. Typed sheets, columns, figures that didn't lie. American carrier construction, USS Essex, launching November 1942. USS Yorktown II, launching January 1943. USS Intrepid, Hornet II, Franklin, Ticonderoga, Randolph, Lexington II, all scheduled 1943. 24 Essex-class carriers planned, not proposed, planned. The room absorbed this in silence. Destroyers, 175 Fletcher-class destroyers under construction. First 50 launching by end of 1942. Another 100 by mid-1943. Aircraft production. January 1942, 1,800 aircraft per month. July 1942, 4,500 per month. Projected December 1942, 6,000 per month. Projected 1943, 8,000 per month. For comparison, Japan's peak production, 850 aircraft per month. Pilot training. America graduating 4,500 pilots per month. Japan, 400 per month. Industrial capacity. U.S. steel production, 80 million tons per year. Japanese steel production, 7 million tons per year. Oil. U.S. oil production, 4 million barrels per day. Japanese oil imports with all of Southeast Asia, 50,000 barrels per day. The lieutenant's voice had gone flat, mechanical, like a man reading casualty lists who had stopped feeling them. Merchant shipping. We've sunk approximately 800,000 tons of American shipping since December. In the same period, American shipyards have launched 2.1 million tons. Liberty ships are now being built in 45 days. One shipyard in California launched 3 in a single week. He flipped another page. Submarine production. They're launching 1 fleet boat every 4 days. By end of year, they'll have 60 operational submarines in the Pacific. By mid-1943, over 100. One of the admirals, Vice Admiral Nobutek Kondo, stood abruptly, walked to the bulkhead, pressed his palm against the steel as if to steady himself. And our production? We have 18 fleet submarines operational. Construction rate is 1 per month. We lost 6 at Midway. The cigarette smoke hung in the air like fog. Admiral Ugaki sat back down. He did not look at the others. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had plotted the course to Pearl Harbor, that had signed the orders, that had moved the markers across the map in November 1941. "Continue," he said quietly. The lieutenant hesitated. Then he turned to the final section, replacement rates. This was where the mathematics became arithmetic, where strategy became biology, where hope became ash. At Midway, we lost approximately 110 trained carrier pilots, killed or missing. These were men with an average of 800 flight hours. Combat veterans from China, Pearl Harbor, the East Indies. He paused. The American pilots we faced, many were green. Some had less than 300 hours. They made mistakes, their formations broke apart. Their torpedo bombers were slaughtered. Another pause. But there were so many of them. One of the admirals, Rear Admiral Hiroaki Abe, spoke for the first time. His voice was hoarse. "How long to replace our losses? To train a carrier pilot to the standard of those we lost at Midway? 18 months, minimum. We have the instructors. We have the aircraft. We do not have the fuel to train them properly. We do not have the time. And the Americans? They are graduating pilots every week, thousands of them flying over Texas, over Florida, over California, burning fuel we cannot match. They make mistakes, they crash, they learn, and there are always more." Ugaki's jaw tightened. "The carriers we lost, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. When can they be replaced?" The lieutenant's voice cracked. "Sir, Akagi took 7 years to build. Kaga was converted from a battleship hull. We have 2 fleet carriers under construction, Taiho and Unryu. Best estimate for Taiho, late 1943. Unryu, mid-1944. 2 carriers." "Yes, sir." and they will have 24. Silence. Vice Admiral Kondo turned from the bulkhead. His face was gray. We sank 5 of their battleships at Pearl Harbor. 4, sir. Arizona, Oklahoma, California, and West Virginia. Nevada was beached but salvageable. 4 then. 4 battleships, and they have already... California and West Virginia are being refloated. They'll be back in service by 1944. Oklahoma is a total loss. But, sir, the lieutenant's hands trembled slightly. They're building 10 new battleships, Iowa-class and Montana-class. Each one larger, faster, more heavily armed than anything we have. First 3 launch next year. Admiral Abe closed his eyes. We didn't sink their fleet, he said softly. We interrupted it. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, because it was true. Pearl Harbor hadn't crippled America. It had insulted her, embarrassed her, bloodied her nose in front of the world. And what Japan had mistaken for a killing blow was actually something far worse. It was a provocation. They had attacked the one nation on Earth with the industrial capacity to absorb the loss, rebuild, and then retaliate with a force no island empire could withstand. They had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. Ugaki spoke again. His voice was steady now. The voice of a man who had accepted what could not be changed. The oil. Tell me about the oil. The lieutenant nodded. He had been dreading this part. Our pre-war strategic reserve was 43 million barrels. We calculated this would sustain fleet operations for 18 months of intensive combat. With the Dutch East Indies and Borneo, we projected we could extend that indefinitely. And we are consuming oil faster than we anticipated. The American submarine campaign is more effective than predicted. Tankers are being sunk. Refineries are struggling with maintenance. Current consumption rate. We will exhaust strategic reserves by mid-1943. After that, we are dependent entirely on imports from the South, which the Americans are sinking. Yes, sir. Kondo's voice was bitter. Then we are not fighting a war. We are fighting a clock. Yes, sir. Not might be lost. Was lost. The math was simple, brutal, inevitable. Japan could not replace what it lost faster than America could build. Japan could not train pilots faster than America could graduate them. Japan could not fuel its fleet longer than America could starve it. Every battle won was a delay. Every carrier sunk was a timer counting down. Every pilot killed was a hole that could not be filled. And across the Pacific, in a nation they had thought decadent, soft, isolationist, in a nation they believed would sue for peace after one hard blow. Shipyards were working 3 shifts. Factories were running 24 hours. Women were welding. Boys were enlisting. And the president had signed a production order that would, by 1943, give America a navy larger than all other navies on Earth combined. The lieutenant gathered his papers, but Admiral Ugaki raised a hand. Wait. The young officer froze. There's more, isn't there? Something you haven't said. The lieutenant's face went pale. He glanced at the other admirals, then back to Ugaki. Sir, there is a supplementary analysis from Commander Nakajima, Naval Intelligence. He asked that it not be included in the official report. Why? Because it concludes that the war is unwinnable. Mathematically, strategically, industrially, he fears it would be considered defeatist. Ugaki's voice was ice. Read it. The lieutenant pulled a thin folder from the bottom of his stack. His hands shook as he opened it. Commander Nakajima's analysis examines the fundamental miscalculation in our strategic planning. He argues that we made 3 critical errors. Not tactical errors, not intelligence failures, structural errors. He cleared his throat. Error 1. We assumed America would negotiate. Our entire strategy was based on the belief that America, a democracy, a nation of merchants, would not stomach a long war in the Pacific. That after Pearl Harbor, after losing the Philippines, after seeing their sons die on remote islands, they would accept a negotiated peace, a recognition of our sphere, co-prosperity, a divided Pacific. The lieutenant looked up. Commander Nakajima argues this was a fundamental misreading of American psychology. We studied their economy, their military, their politics, but we did not understand their identity. Americans do not negotiate after being attacked. They escalate. It is woven into their founding myth. The Revolution, 1812, the Alamo. They remember their defeats more than their victories, and they avenge them. One of the admirals, Rear Admiral Takeo Kurita, spoke quietly. Yamamoto said this. Before Pearl Harbor, he said, "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant." Yes, sir. The commander quotes him, but he goes further. He says we did not just awaken the giant, we gave them moral clarity. Before Pearl Harbor, America was divided. Isolationists against interventionists. The Neutrality Acts. America first. But after Pearl Harbor, the lieutenant's voice dropped. After Pearl Harbor, they were unified. We gave them a cause, a villain, a reason to mobilize every factory, every farm, every man and woman. We turned their debate into a crusade. The room was silent. Error 2. We assumed our qualitative advantage would persist. In December 1941, we had the finest naval aviators in the world, men who had trained for years, who had combat experience in China, who could land a zero on a carrier deck at night in a storm. Our torpedoes were superior. Our doctrine was superior. Our night-fighting tactics were superior. He turned a page. Commander Nakajima calculates that our qualitative advantage bought us approximately 6 months, maybe 8. Because while our pilots were better, we could not replace them, and the Americans, they learned. At Coral Sea, their pilots made mistakes. At Midway, their torpedo bombers flew into slaughter, but they learned. And now at Guadalcanal, they are learning faster. Their doctrine is evolving, their pilots are gaining experience, and they have radar, ship-mounted, aircraft-mounted. They can see us coming before we see them. The lieutenant's voice became clinical, detached. By mid-1943, Commander Nakajima projects that the qualitative gap will narrow. By late 1943, it will vanish. And then we are left with numbers. Just numbers. And in numbers. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Error 3. We assumed limited liability. This was the deepest cut, the cruelest truth. We believed we could seize the resources we needed, oil, rubber, rice, minerals, and then defend them, island by island, atoll by atoll. Make every invasion so costly that America would exhaust itself against our perimeter. The lieutenant looked directly at Admiral Ugaki. But, sir, our perimeter is too large, from the Aleutians to New Guinea, from the Marshall Islands to Burma, 11 time zones, thousands of miles. And we do not have the shipping to supply it. We do not have the fuel to patrol it. We do not have the aircraft to defend it. The Americans do not need to attack everywhere. They only need to attack anywhere. Choose the weakest point. Concentrate force, shatter it, move to the next. Island hopping, they will call it. And each island they take shortens their supply lines and lengthens ours. He paused. Commander Nakajima calculates that our merchant marine, even with all captured ships, can sustain current operations for 14 months. After that, attrition from submarines and air attack will reduce cargo capacity below minimum operational requirements. Garrisons will starve. Fuel will not arrive. The perimeter will collapse not from enemy invasion, but from logistical asphyxiation. Admiral Kondo's voice was hollow. He's saying we cannot defend what we have conquered. Yes, sir. He's saying the empire is already overextended, that every day we hold these territories we bleed fuel, ships, men, supplies, and the Americans bleed us faster than we can regenerate. And if we withdraw, consolidate, the lieutenant shook his head, then we lose the resources we went to war to secure. The oil from the East Indies, the rice from Indochina. Without them, the home islands cannot sustain the war economy. Commander Nakajima calls it a strategic zugzwang, a position where any move worsens our situation. Ugaki leaned forward. His voice was barely above a whisper. Then what does he recommend? The lieutenant's hand stopped shaking. He looked each admiral in the eye. He recommends we seek terms. Now, while we still hold territory, while we still have a fleet, while we can negotiate from strength rather than ruin. He recommends we approach the Soviet Union as an intermediary, offer to return the Philippines, withdraw from China, accept limits, before the mathematics become reality. The words settled like ash after a fire, because they all knew what he was really saying. The war was not lost in the future. It was not contingent on battles yet to be fought. It had been lost on December 7th, 1941. The moment the first bomb fell on Pearl Harbor. Everything since, every victory, every conquest, every island seized, had been a slow-motion collapse. A dying star radiating light from fuel already consumed. They had won battles. But they had lost the war the day they started it. For a long time, no one spoke. The bulb overhead swayed, the ship creaked. Somewhere on the flight deck, a pneumatic wrench screamed against metal. Normal sounds, the sounds of war continuing. But inside that briefing room, 5 men sat with a knowledge that could not be shared, could not be spoken outside these walls, could not be written in any report that would reach Tokyo. Admiral Abe finally broke the silence. This analysis, Nakajima's report, has anyone else seen it? No, sir. He submitted it through secure channels. Eyes only. Good. Abe's voice was firm. It stays that way. If this reaches the Army General Staff, Nakajima will be arrested for defeatism. If it reaches the ministers, they will call it treason. If it reaches the public. He didn't finish, because they all knew. Japan in August 1942 was a nation intoxicated by victory. The newspapers printed triumph after triumph. The radio broadcast anthems of conquest. Children played with toy zeros and dreamed of glory. To tell them the truth would shatter something that could not be repaired. Vice Admiral Kondo stood, walked to the small porthole, stared out at the gray sea. Yamamoto knows, he said quietly. He's known since the beginning. That's why he opposed the war, why he warned the ministers, why he demanded 6 months. And after 6 months? Ugaki's voice was bitter. What did he think would happen? He hoped for a miracle, a negotiated peace, a recognition that we could not be defeated even if we could not win. He gambled that one decisive blow, Pearl Harbor, would break American will. Kondo turned back to face them, but we did not break their will. We forged it. Admiral Kurita pulled out another cigarette. His hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. There was a strange calm in his voice. So what do we do? It was the question that mattered. The only question. Ugaki answered, slowly, each word chosen with care. We do our duty. We fight, we hold. We make them pay for every island, every mile, every dawn. We buy time for diplomacy, for reason, for some turn of fortune we cannot foresee. Do you believe that? Kurita's voice was gentle. not challenging, just asking. Ugaki met his eyes. No. The word hung in the air like smoke, but I believe in my oath. To the Emperor, to Japan, to the men on this ship and every ship in this fleet. They did not choose this war. We did not choose this war, but we will fight it until we are ordered to stop, or until there is nothing left to fight with. He stood, gathered the papers, handed them back to the lieutenant. Burn these, all of them. Nakajima's analysis, the production figures, everything. If you're questioned, they never existed. You compiled routine intelligence estimates. Nothing more. Sir, that's an order. The lieutenant saluted. His face was pale. He understood. He was being asked to destroy truth to preserve morale, to burn mathematics so that hope, however false, could persist. One more thing. Ugaki's voice softened slightly. Tell Commander Nakajima. Tell him his analysis was brilliant. Tell him he was right, and tell him that being right changes nothing. The lieutenant left. The door closed behind him with a hollow clang. The 4 remaining admirals sat in silence. Outside, the sun was setting. The light through the porthole turned gold, then amber, then red. Admiral Abe spoke quietly. How long do you think we have? Ugaki stared at the table, at the empty space where the reports had been. Nakajima said mid-1943, I think he's optimistic. Why? Because he assumed rational strategy. But Tokyo is not rational. They will not negotiate. They will not consolidate. They will hold every island until it is taken, defend every atoll until it drowns. And when the home islands are threatened, they will call for sacrifice, for special attack, for measures that would have been unthinkable in December. Kondo's voice was hollow. I'm talking about what happens when mathematics meets mythology, when the numbers say surrender and the culture says death. I'm talking about years, not of war, but of immolation. The light faded, the room darkened. We should have listened to Yamamoto, Admiral Kurita said softly. We should have told the ministers no. We should have found another way. There was no other way, Ugaki replied. The oil embargo, the frozen assets, the ultimatums. We were being slowly strangled. The army wanted war. The ministers wanted war. The Zaibatsu wanted expansion. And we believed we could win. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. We believed our own propaganda, the superiority of spirit over material, the warrior code over industrial output. We believed that courage and discipline could overcome factories and oil fields. And now? Now we know the price of that belief. The room was dark now. Only the faint glow from the corridor outside. Admiral Ugaki stood, straightened his uniform. His voice was steady, professional. Gentlemen, we have a war to fight, ships to command, men to lead. Whatever we know, whatever we believe, we do not speak of this again. Not to each other, not to our staffs, not in our diaries. He moved toward the door, paused, looked back. History will judge us. It will say we were fools, fanatics, war criminals, perhaps. It will not understand the pressure, the culture, the impossible choices, but it will remember one thing clearly. What? That we started a war we could not win, against an enemy we did not understand, and that everything that follows, every death, every burning city, every ship sunk, every island lost, began on December 7th, 1941, the day we believed we were winning. He opened the door. Light flooded in. The day we sealed our fate. The meeting aboard Shokaku was never recorded in official logs. Nakajima's report was burned. The 5 admirals never spoke of it again. But in the years that followed, as the perimeter collapsed, as the islands fell, as the B-29s burned Tokyo and the atomic fires consumed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Those who survived must have remembered that August afternoon, when they saw the numbers, when they knew, when they understood that Pearl Harbor, their greatest victory today, had been their greatest mistake. In war, even perfect victories conceal your defeat.